If you've been wanting to give a bedroom like mine a refresh, wallpapering is one of the easiest and most exciting way to do it. And if you're not sure where to start, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I'm going to wallpaper every wall in this bedroom. So let's get to it. But before we get going, let me walk you through the exact tools and materials that you're going to need to do this project. Obviously, you're going to need some wallpaper. This is a gorgeous design from Albany at Brewers, and you really don't need to spend hundreds and hundreds on a decent wallpaper. There are so many wallpapers out there that are like £200 to £300 a roll. You don't need to spend that amount of money. You can get rolls like this, under £50 a roll, and still high quality, and the designs are just as cute. Then you're going to need some wallpaper paste. I have quite a lot here. Again, this is the Albany range. I've actually never used this one before, but we'll see how it goes. Then smoothing tools. You can either use a wallpaper brush like this, or you can use one of these plastic smoothing tools. Both of them I find very effective, and I actually use both of them in different ways, and I'll show you how. Very cheap and affordable. To cut the wallpaper, you'll need some good scissors. Don't use blunt ones, it will only ruin your paper. Then to get that nice sharp edge, you want a Stanley knife, fresh with a new blade, and a pencil and ruler as well will come in very handy. You're going to need a spirit level or a laser level, depending on what you've got. I'm going to use a spirit level because I know not everyone has a laser level, and you get just as good a finish with this. And the last tools that I use is a sponge, just to wipe away any excess adhesive that comes out of the cracks, and a little wallpaper joint roller. There's mixed reviews if these are actually very good, but they're my ride or die. And they're only like £3.99, so why wouldn't you for good seams? Once you've got your tools, we can start. And one of the hardest jobs with wallpapering is deciding where to actually start. Now, every wall in this room has its own little complexity. So over here, we've got lots of cutting due to the doors. We've got a bay window and a radiator over there. The wall in front of me has the chimney on with lots of edges and corners. I would be inclined to give you the advice that you want to start on the easiest wall first, and start in a corner that is not going to be that well noticed if you make some boo-boos on the first go. So for me, it makes sense to start on this wall behind the bed because it's just a flat wall, so it's going to be an easy start to get me used to it. And I'm going to start in the left-hand corner because it's behind the door, so it doesn't really matter if the pattern doesn't match up. So this is where I'm going to start. The other thing you can do before you start to make sure that you're not going to end up with some really horrible cuts is if you measure the width of your wallpaper. So this measurement here, for me, is 52.5. So then I can go around the wall just measuring 52.5 widths just to make sure that we don't end up with any slithers at corners or anything that's going to be very annoying. So by doing that, I've got 16 centimetres at that edge, which is enough for me to put in, a decent size of wallpaper without it being fiddly and annoying. So I think we're good to start. So I know my wallpaper width is 52.5, so I'm going to subtract 1 centimetre to account for this edge not being straight, and I'm going to draw markers at 51.5 from the door frame. And then using my markers as a guide, I will line them up roughly, see if they're straight, which in my case they weren't, so straighten up the spirit level, and then draw my starting line, making sure that the line is perfectly straight. And this line here is going to be the edge of my first bit of wallpaper. Making sure that the first piece of wallpaper is straight is one of the most important things about wallpapering. So take your time with this and make sure you're perfectly happy with that line before we get going. Then we want to measure vertically to see how much wallpaper we're going to cut off the roll to start going. £186-ish. Right, so the wall before I forget. 186. I'm gonna roll out my first bit of wallpaper. Right, roll out my first length. So we want to add 5 to 10 centimetres on either end. So if we make this 200 centimetres, that should be perfect. So let's measure that out. Okay, I'm gonna have to do this on the floor. Then I'm just going to put a little crease in it to fold it across, and then we're going to cut our first strip. Don't try and do that glidey thing with the scissors, guys. It's not worth ripping the wallpaper for. Trust me, that's from experience. Should be slightly bigger than a bit of what we have. Perfect. So now let's paste up the wall. I actually totally forgot to mention, but you will need some sort of tool to get the paste on the wall. I would always recommend for your first go to get a wallpaper where you paste the wall, because pasting the paper I found enormously more complicated. So I've just got a little paintbrush, a roller and a paint caddy from Brewers. I'm going to use my brush to do all of the edges, and you don't really need to be that neat, just sort of an even layer across the whole piece of wall. This is also where your line comes in handy, because you now know how much of the wall to paste. Be very careful with your wallpaper. I'm going to place wallpaper on the wall, lining it up with our pencil line, leaving a little bit of excess at the top. So our wallpaper is perfectly up against that line. So now I'm going to use this brush just to gently push all of the air out and get it flat up against the other corners. You want to kind of push outwards from the middle. And when you get to this edge, it's sort of a little one of them. So once the paper's up, I start by going in with my plastic scraper to push out any air bubbles and excess glue behind the paper. And I work from the centre out towards the edges, which is really important for getting it nice and flat. Then I run the scraper firmly along the top, bottom and side edges to create a clean crease, and that's where we're going to cut. Apologies that my arm is in the way for a lot of this. For trimming, I then use a metal ruler and a really fresh Stanley knife blade. Sharp is again non-negotiable. And I run the blade slowly along the edge of the ruler to get a really crisp finish line. The worst thing that you can do is rush this process. If the paper starts to pull or tear, I've been there, just slow down and don't worry about it. You can use the scissors to snip any stubborn bits, or try going in the opposite direction, but just don't pull it. When you get to a corner, you'll probably need to make a small diagonal cut which ends right in the corner where the wall is. This will then enable you to flatten the paper against the wall, and then you can trim it as normal. I then do this on all three edges, and then I finish with one last pass using the brush and wipe down any edges with a clean sponge and water. Then you just repeat the same process, lining up your next piece neatly against the first rather than up against your pencil line. And once that second piece is in place, you can then go over the seam with your seam roller to make sure that it's properly bonded and it's nice and flat. So now you can properly wallpaper a flat wall. Let's move on to corners. Now when you get to an inside corner like this, the natural thing to do, I know, is to just put your wallpaper round the corner like you're doing on every other wall. But that is not the best way to do this, because most corners like this are actually not square. So if you end up doing that, you're most likely to start on your next wall wonky. So there's a technique that I use which is cutting the corner, and I'll show you how to do that now. Also, apologies though, it's so dark. It's 1 o'clock and it's like it's 8 o'clock in the evening. The first thing I want to do is measure the distance from the end of the wallpaper to the corner at the top, middle and bottom. 159. This is going to end up being a square corner, isn't it? Here we go. 164. So 164 is our widest part of this strip. 164. I'm going to write it down because I have a brain like a sieve. Then you want to add on 0.5 centimetre. 169. And we're going to cut our next strip lengthways at 169. Make sure that you're measuring from the right side that joins up to the piece that's on the wall, which is this side for me. And then I will measure my 16.9 at a few spots down the paper, and then I'm going to draw a straight line to join it all up. Then I use a spirit level to join up. Overhang at the top, little overhang at the bottom. I'm going to wrap that edge around the corner. think that's pretty good. Now let's paste up the wall. So focusing on this joint, push them edges together as normal. The beauty of this wallpaper is because it's stripes, the join is also a stripe, so it's even more, or even less noticeable than usual. So I'll get out any potential air bubbles, push that in, get out any bubbles. Then I like to go in with this scraper because this hard edge makes it easier to get a real crisp join in the corner. So I'll just run that up just to get rid of any air bubbles. You can use a sponge to get rid of any excess. I'll like scrape into the corner and then run it up and down to create that really crisp edge. Then we'll cut the top and bottom like normal. The offcut from this is 24.7 centimetres wide. So the next thing I want to do is measure from the corner outwards 24.7 centimetres at the top, middle and bottom, and then we're going to draw a new straight line which will create the new straightness for this piece of wall, making sure that this is level. Now, when I place my off-cut piece of wallpaper, I want to make sure the outside edge is up against this line, and then we know that this wall will then be straight, regardless of this wonky corner. Make sure to get in that corner again. You want to put your paste over the top of this wallpaper. Then cut the top and the bottom as normal, and you start your brand new wall. So now we've nailed inside corners, we come across an outside corner. But luckily outside corners are far easier because all we're going to do is just wrap the wallpaper around the wall. I get my scissors and make a little cut at the top and the bottom on the join just to help it go around the corner. And we're going to pull it around the corner. We want to make sure this corner is tight. And use your brush, get out any of those air bubbles. So now we have come across items that we need to get around when we're doing our wallpapering, like this switch here and the sockets down below. And I can't stress this step enough, but the first thing you need to do is turn the electric off on these items. I'm going to go do this at the fuse board. Sockets, turn the sockets off. I very much recommend one of these. It checks for electrical, whatever that is, voltage I think. So I can, this one is just the internet, so I'm going to pull the internet off. And then these two, I'm going to switch off, but I can also use this to check that there is nothing coming through there. So we should be safe. It's now very dark. I have to turn the lights off. Now it's December, so it's dark 90% of the time. There's million wires here that I didn't clear up.
So you're going to hang the wallpaper as normal, lining it up with either your pencil line or the previous piece. Then you're going to use your smoothing brush to smooth it right up to the edge of the socket. Then you can either use a Stanley knife or scissors to make a cross in the centre of where the socket is going to be. Just be really careful in not cutting this too large. Although I say do this carefully, but you can see I'm really just cutting and pushing that socket through with no real method here, trying to birth it out the other side. But the important part is I'm doing it slowly as to not rip the paper. Once you've managed to get the socket through, then we smooth everything back down, we wipe away any excess paste, we refit the socket, and then you can turn your power back on.
And we're done. I think the key thing to remember when you're wallpapering a room is just to have patience, take your time and take every little obstacle one at a time that's in front of you. And you can absolutely wallpaper with no experience. Once your first strip is up vertically, you just follow that strip around the room and you'll end up with a beautiful room like mine. So if you found this helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know in the comments what other DIY projects you'd like a tutorial on, and stick around for the bedroom reveal. See you later, guys.